Part 3. Organizational Carbon Footprint Accounting Guidance. Organizational carbon footprint measures the total greenhouse gases emission from all activities across the organization, including energy used in building, industrial processes and company vehicle. First, we need to know our organizational carbon footprint goal and scope. Goal is the first stage in creating an organizational carbon footprint, and it establishes the general context. There are 5 goal definitions for the organizational carbon footprint, which are intended application, reasons for carrying out the study and decision context, target audience, commissioner of the study and review procedure. Scope refers to a detailed description of the system that will be assessed, as well as the analytical requirements that will be used. Scope definition shall include defining the organization, unit of analysis, and product/services, amount of goods/services over the reporting, system boundaries, cutoff criteria, carbon footprint impact categories and assumptions or limitations. Next step is organizational carbon footprint inventory analysis. As a foundation for estimating the organization carbon footprint, an inventory or called as profile of all ecologically relevant material or energy resource inputs or outputs and emissions into air, water, and soil to be gathered. In practice, and generally, directly obtained, facility-specific inventory data should be utilized for processes inside the designated organizational boundaries. Data management plan is a description of data gathering procedures, which include processes or activities that take place inside established organizational boundaries as well as activities or processes that take place outside of those bounds. Sources of data, methodologies of calculation, transmission, storage and backup procedures of data, and data collection, input and handling operations, data documentation, and emission estimates are all subject to quality control and review procedures. Next is evaluation of resources use and emission profile data. First, evaluation of directly attributable activities. Activities at the site level. Investing in capital equipment. Travel of business. Transportation for clients and visitors. Transportation from suppliers. Streams of waste. Second, evaluation of indirectly attributable upstream activities. Obtaining raw materials. Activities of agriculture. Changes in land use and land usage. Upstream operations require power generated. Waste created by upstream operations is. Lastly, evaluation of indirectly attributable downstream activity. Client transportation and distribution of offered products or services. The products or services are in the process of being used. The products or services have reached the end of their lives. And third-party waste treatment facilities. Generic data collection is data for a given procedure that is not based on actual measurements or calculations. Generic data sources must be documented. Generic data also includes literature or specific papers. Data includes data on consumption at the process or plant level and also life cycle inventory databases, industry association reports, government statistics, and other sources provide industry average life cycle data. Data gaps occur when particular or generic data is not available adequately indicative of the process in issue. Sufficient information should be available to produce a credible estimate of the missing data for most processes when data is missing. Data gaps exist when there is no data for a certain input or output, exist for a similar process but the data was gathered at a different location, separate technique to create data, and gather information during different time. How to deal with remaining missing inventory data. Generic data can pursuant the quality standards set out in this specification, and extrapolated data is data from another process or product that has been modified or tailored to match. Next, we need to do impact assessment of the organizational carbon footprint. The organizational carbon footprint impact assessment phase is undertaken to calculate the carbon performance of the organization being assessed using the selected organizational carbon footprint impact assessment categories and methods. Organizational carbon footprint impact assessment involves 2 mandatory steps. The first one is classification, which entails allocating each value from the resource use and emissions profile to the appropriate carbon footprint effect categories. Meanwhile, characterization is multiply the figure obtained for each impact category in the resource use and emissions profile by the corresponding characterization factor. This enables the grouping of effect indicators into groups. Lastly, interpretation of organizational carbon footprint. Organization carbon footprint research are interpreted for two purposes: includes identifying methodological concerns and decisions that may have a substantial impact and identifying the major contributors to the computed findings. Assessing the amount to which methodological decisions such as system boundaries, cutoff criteria, data sources, and allocation choices impact the analytical conclusions is necessary for identifying critical methodological issues. It must be assured that these comply with the standards outlined and are contextually suitable. Tools that should be used to assess the robustness of the organization carbon footprint model include completeness check used to examine the inventory data to make sure it meets the established goals, scope, system limits, cutoff criteria, and quality requirements. Sensitivity checks used to assess the impact of adopting alternative, defensible choices where these are identified on the amount as well as the impact of implementing other defensible options where these are available. Consistency checks used to assess the impact of adopting alternative, defensible choices where these are identified on the amount as well as the impact of implementing alternative, defensible options where these are identifiable.